Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, Seun in Science. I'm Seun and I'm in Science, and today we are speaking with Professor Weston Smith. I mean, if you work in stem cell science, you know who he is. I'm just gonna let him introduce himself and describe himself in 3 words, just to let us know. Let's describe yourself in 3 words, Austin. What would you describe yourself as?
I'd say I'm a scientist, dad, an Everton supporter.
Ah, okay, that's football.
Well, yeah, it's football. That's right. Yeah.
So yeah, I was wanting to kick off this conversation just talking about or having you share your experience so far in science. One thing that I want to emphasize on is whether or not you've always been interested in science. Did you, from a young age, always know that you're going to be what you're doing right now? Like, is that always been a vision for you, or has that just been more of what life has given to you and how you've, made decisions with the options that you had?
That's an interesting phrase, what life has given to you. Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of how it is. When I was a kid, I was lucky to be good at quite a lot of things at school. And actually my favourite subject for a long time was English. So that's like the first time in my life I can recall having to make a decision. Was I going to do English at A-level or just do all sciences? And it was quite tough because I really did like literature. But in the end I decided to do sciences, because science is real and literature is made up, and I can always go and read literature, right? But as a subject to study, I thought it's not the right thing. So then I did maths and science, and I went to university, but I didn't have any idea what I was going to do, and I wasn't a very serious student as an undergraduate. Wasn't that interested really until in my final year I did a extended research project. And prior to that, my experience of practicals, it was just terrible. I just thought, this is just, this is made up, this stuff. It doesn't really, But then when I did the research project, I just really loved it. And being in the lab and that community in the lab. And it was in the one topic I'd always been interested in.
Which one?
Which was pluripotency, right? So I did know if I was ever going to do anything in research, it was going to be about that was the thing I was most interested in. And then when I found that I really liked it, not just theoretically, actually doing the research, then I decided, actually very late on, that I'd try and get a PhD place. And I was quite lucky, the lab, that because I didn't want to stay in Oxford, which is where I was at that time, or in Cambridge, which is the other obvious place doing pluripotency research at that time. So the one other place was Edinburgh. And Martin Hooper's lab there actually had a PhD place advertised, which Martin hadn't been able to fill. So I was fortunate enough to get that. And then I did a PhD, and even towards the end of my PhD, I didn't know what I was going to do, and I thought for quite a while about doing something else altogether. And then I realised, the more I looked for other things, everything I looked at just wasn't going to be satisfying, which wasn't going to be it. So stay with science. Not because there's just nothing as interesting as pluripotency,
So it's just always been pluripotency in that regards, and then it's just
but you know, actually, in the broader context of both developmental biology and stem cell biology, so pluripotency's really always sat at that interface. So it's quite rich on those. You know, there's some aspects of developmental biology I find quite boring and uninteresting, but other bits really interesting, and they're the bits that fit with pluripotency, you know, about cell fate decisions. And then, stem cells were always quite fascinating for me, the potential and power and the idea that this is something we could take control of.
So, I mean, okay, as I said, working with stem cell, you revolutionized the field in regards to 2I, which is what we culture cells in now. What was that process like? How do you become someone who changes the field like you did?
Well, I don't know if I changed the field. That's for others to judge. But you know, so I was very lucky in my PhD, but it's also, you know, I think something's very true that you know, you do need luck in science, but you have to have a prepared mind, and people see the same things, but they don't realise what they mean, or they don't ask the same next question. So, you know, partly because I was interested both in stem cell biology and in developmental biology. In my PhD, I was searching for something that other people weren't really looking for. So it wasn't actually my project, but I just had the chance to be able to dabble with this. And so I found a way to grow pluripotent stem cells without feeders. And again, you know, most people at the time didn't think that was really that interesting or important, but for me it was just amazing, and because I could see how beautiful the cells were grown in this way, but it was the first step to taking control of them and really knowing what they required. So I had to know then what was really the molecular explanation for this. So that's what I did in my postdoc. So this is all old stuff that you guys don't know about, but that's what led to LIF. And then it took a lot of work after that to get beyond that to how we could culture the cells in a fully defined way without serum, and that eventually led to 2I. And then, you know, then it's a kind of quite different thing. So there's something you've done with your own hands and eyes that you're very proud of. And then there's something that is done by somebody working for you or with you. And that your eyes and mind are still involved, but they're actually doing all the, not just the hands, also really inputting. So the 2I thing really came from, although there was other people that had made some important findings along the way. It was a fantastic postdoc, Chi Long, who came up with 2I. He would do these experiments and I would look at them and we would just almost have, like, not exactly an argument, but this discussion all the time, right? About how to get this to work, and it was almost like he was determined to prove me wrong with every idea that I had came up with. But you know, that we kind of drove one another to, and then it was a very good time, and and the result was perfect. Then we had a horrible time getting it published, but that's just that's one of these things.
So you've done your PhD, your postdoc, and you've been a PI, now a professor. what has been the experience, like what has been the changes? So when you're a PhD student to being a postdoc, what responsibilities, how did that build your character, and how have all of these things, you know, changed you or developed your character to what you are now, who you are now?
I don't know. Possibly I used to be quite a nice person. I don't know.
We're going to get onto that soon.
I don't know. Yeah. What I would say was the best time, the most enjoyable time was being a postdoc. That was just a great time. I mean, it may also be a sort of, looking back with slightly blinkered eyes, because I do remember, postdocs then as now were always concerned about, well, how am I going to get a job? And that was kind of the main topic of conversation often. But, it was that time when you didn't have to worry about anything else other than the science you were doing, because you didn't have any other responsibilities. And yet, you've learnt everything from doing a PhD, so you can do stuff. And I had, good colleagues in the lab, good postdocs. We all knew we were good and that we had a good lab. We were really doing stuff that could change things. Well, that's how we felt about it. Didn't always turn out that way, but so once you become a PI, it just that's the crazy thing, right? All postdocs want to become PIs. Most of them nowadays are sensible enough to realise it's really not a great job, because you just suddenly are landed with all this stuff that is completely different, that you haven't thought about before, you're not prepared for, you're not often naturally good at, and so that's a difficult transition. I mean, I say that not because I had any particular difficulties, but I've seen it a lot with people around me, and then when I was institute director, that was one of the things was just most obvious. I had to try and help as much as possible people to get through that transition. But it is difficult, because people don't realise it until they're in it, just how much other stuff there suddenly is to do, and also, I mean, it's not just the administration and meetings and stuff, it's the fact that you are responsible for other people's research, and you have to give them as much time as you can. And actually what that means is your own research that you want to do with your own hands has to take second place. And people, that is a very difficult thing, and you can't do it overnight, but it is the transition that people have to make.
Yeah, I mean, so I did my undergrad and my master's at King's, and when I graduated, I wasn't too sure. I knew that at some point I wanted to definitely have a career in science, but I wasn't sure I was just ready to do a PhD, because I, at that point, felt intimidated by it. So that's why I decided to stay within science, work as a research assistant. And when I was in the first few months of working, I was also trying to think, okay, what would I want to do after a PhD? And I saw obviously Brian, my boss, a PI, and I just saw how much, because he obviously still loves to be in the lab. He's
absolutely
still in the lab.
Yeah.
But there's moments where he's unable to be in the lab because there's so much admin stuff, and I think that was my first time really seeing that directly, and I was like, whoa, hold up. It's not as fun to be a PI, and I know I'm passionate about the science. I love to do the wet lab stuff and be there doing stuff that I don't know if I could handle, or if I would feel sort of I don't know, it'll feel like I'm in a tight box to do that. Anyway, it's still something that is developing, but as you said, those are points that working in this field, working in the industry, I'm seeing firsthand. I also want to ask, what would be your tip? So I'm someone who, I said, I do want to do a PhD. I applied this year just gone, but I did the silly thing about applying to just one place here, and I didn't get through.
Yeah, that is silly. Well, you know.
But it's because I knew I wanted to be here. But I kind of put all my eggs in one basket. So that's definitely one tip that I would advise you guys, don't do that. But just in general, what would you give to a budding scientist, someone who is just about to step into their career, you know, still aloof to the to the world? What would be your top tips?
So I think it's good if you know if you have a pretty good idea of what you want to do in terms of what area of research you want to be in, and that you've thought about that, like that you can defend that. So you know, if I'm looking at somebody for a PhD student, and I'll tell you now, it's the most difficult thing to interview for is for PhD candidates, and you don't always get it right in selecting the best candidates, because there's not much to go on in terms of any track record, and it's, you know, people can say the right things in an interview, and you can't really find. It's difficult to find out if they're just saying the right things or if they really believe them and can really deliver in them. Whereas with the postdoc, you've got a record and you can really interrogate them. But the thing that I always look for in a PhD student, obviously there's a level of intelligence they have to have, but then it is, you know, is this person actually really interested in science, and they really want to understand something, how something works. There's some real enthusiasm and curiosity there, and not they're just doing it as some kind of career job, or because they want to be a student for 4 more years, or because they just can't think of anything else to do, you know. Yeah, but honestly, how often that's what it is, right? They haven't really thought about it. Like, I'm a clever kid, I don't want to be a medic, I don't want to go off to the city, so I'll do a PhD. Well, you know, fine, but and you know, you're probably clever enough to do a PhD, but in the end, this job, which is what it's about, is very demanding if you're to be successful at it. And you know, often, almost all the people who come to interview will say that they can work hard. Well, anybody can say they can work hard. Working hard is about having their motivation and the drive, you know, to come in at midnight on a Sunday to feed yourselves, because it has to be done, because otherwise you won't get the answer to that question you're asking. And it has to be driven by you, not by anybody else telling you to do that. And you know, that's something that not that many people actually have. And so you kind of, you know, and it's difficult to find out from interviewing people if they really have that. It's particularly difficult if they haven't worked in a lab before. So, you know, you've done the right thing by getting experience in a lab, so at least you know you like doing that. Because that's the key first thing, you've got to really like being in the lab. You know, but kids who are just coming straight from a first degree, they've often had so little time in the lab that they can't really know that. And so sometimes it turns out when they get into the lab, it's just not what they're good at. And you know, that's not their fault. It's just the way it's, you know, people are different. So yeah, you kind of got to really know in yourself, this is what you want to do and why. And I mean, there would be different answers as well for different PIs or different kinds of PhD programs, you know, the answer might not be just about curiosity. It might be because you really want to make something, do something. In you know, the parts of stem cell biology are like that. But there's got to be some real drive from you that this is what I want to do. Because the thing still about going into a PhD is it's a professional qualification, so it's about setting yourself up to be able to do, in the end, something that you decide yourself what it is you want to do, and ideally it would be something important that nobody else can do or is doing, you know, rather than just being part of a big machine. Yeah. Reality is often many people will end up being part of that big machine, but you know, I think at least at the start people should have the aspiration that they don't have to be, even if they may choose later on that that's what they will do. Very long-winded.